Iranian officials urgently held secret closed-door talks with the team of American President Donald Trump to ease tensions after President Trump's threat to use force in response to the killing of protesters in Iran. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic, Abbas Araghchi, contacted White House Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff and requested a personal meeting. In this way, Tehran hopes to ease tensions with Washington or at least buy time before Trump makes a decision on a new military strike against Iran. And this is no longer a joke. Trump himself stated that the Ayatollah regime has crossed all his red lines. Therefore, the United States is considering military options in response to the crackdown on protests in Iran, where, according to official estimates, 544 people have died, but as videos show, the number of casualties could be much higher. The Iranian regime has now brought hundreds, maybe even thousands of people out onto the streets for pro-government rallies. For the first time since the Islamic Revolution, people in Tehran are being asked to donate blood at hospitals. Meanwhile, there have been reports that the protests in Iran have subsided after mass repression, but Reza Pahlavi is still calling for the continuation and even the radicalization of the protest. Let's discuss together what's happening in Iran right now, why the Ayatollah's regime has requested urgent talks with the Americans, and what Donald Trump is going to do. Let's break everything down, as they say. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I want to ask you something. If you find this episode interesting and useful, you can support the work of this YouTube channel with your donation or a paid sponsorship subscription through the links and details provided. In the description of this video, it says support Alexei Pechi's channel. Choose any format that's convenient for you. I'll be grateful for any support you give, but please do it at the end of this episode. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechi News, the link is in the description of this video. So, I'll start with the latest news update from Iran. At the moment, the Islamic regime has mobilized tens of thousands of security personnel and government employees along with their families and forced them to come and gather in city centers for the event. And now, the state media of the Ayatollah regime, particularly the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting Channel, is selectively broadcasting videos of these staged rallies while continuing the nationwide internet and communications blackout. That's why officially all you can see from Iran is this kind of picture, that everyone in the streets supports Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
I must first bow my head in respect before this historical awareness, this sense of responsibility, this forgiveness and magnanimity of the Iranian people, this insight, this selflessness, this courage, and this kindness. And before I am grateful and thankful, the life of such peoples and nations.
This is part of a coordinated psychological warfare campaign aimed at undermining public morale and discouraging people from joining the ongoing revolutionary process. Especially after January 8 and 9 when, without exaggeration, millions of Iranians took part in nationwide protests and liberated entire regions and cities from the regime's control. According to the human rights activist news agency, 2 weeks after the nationwide protests, more than 10,600 people were arrested and sent to prison. Just think about it, more than 10,000 people were put in prison. Officially, protests took place in 585 locations across the country, in 186 cities in all 31 provinces. And also, according to the human rights activist news agency, as of Sunday, 544 people have died, and dozens more are still under review. Among the dead are 483 protesters, 47 military personnel or law enforcement officers, 8 children, 5 bystanders who did not participate in the protests, and 1 prosecutor. But what does this phrase mean? Dozens more killed are still under review, and this is the most terrifying part. On my Telegram channel, Pechi News, I posted 2 videos yesterday that can't be shown on YouTube, and sensitive viewers shouldn't watch them either. And these videos show how dozens of unidentified bodies are in Tehran morgues, and they aren't officially counted as victims until their relatives are found. These killed people are listed as under review. Nevertheless, after the massive wave of repression in Iran, there has been relative stabilization, and the number of protests has decreased. And on one hand, the government mobilized security forces and deployed units of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to the streets of some cities. On the other hand, the coordination and cohesion of the protests were affected. And this internet blackout, which, as it turned out, the Iranian authorities managed to organize quite effectively, including somehow disabling most of the Starlinks. And here it is said that Russia and China helped. In addition, the Iranian regime very quickly flooded the streets with pro-government counter-protests to pit ordinary people against each other. If the protesters take to those same streets, that's it. Mass demonstrations in support of the Islamic Republic took place in Mashhad, Tehran, Isfahan, Zahedan, Hamadan, and other major cities. The Iranian government claims that several million people took part in them. The opposition, as expected, was skeptical. Reportedly, these were mostly security forces, IRGC officials, and their families. And here is the most important part. If nothing new happens, and if the United States doesn't intervene, the protests may gradually die down, just like they did in 2022. Even if the United States intervenes, it's unclear how people will react. The thing is, American analysts recall that during the 12-day war with Israel, there was unity among the Iranian people. And even Khamenei's opponents suddenly paused their protests to some extent and under a single flag stood against the West. The leader of the monarchists in exile, Reza Pahlavi, once again called for people to take to the streets, attack administrative buildings, and confront law enforcement. It appears his most active period was January 8th and 9th, during the peak of protests and harsh government action, though today Pahlavi announced a new phase of the revolution. So far, it seems the opposition isn't coordinated. Nevertheless, the Ayatollah regime got scared, and it's too early to write off these protests. That is, once again, we need to closely monitor what is happening here. And I'm by no means trying, to downplay the impact of these protests on the regime. After the threat from United States President Donald Trump to use force in response to the killing of protesters in Iran, the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic, Abbas Araghchi, contacted White House Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff and requested a meeting. Sources in the White House told Axios about this. According to them, Tehran hoped to reduce tensions with Washington in this way, or at least buy time before Trump made a decision on further weakening the Ayatollah regime. One of the publication's sources clarified that Araghchi and Witkoff had warned that a meeting could take place in the coming days. On Sunday, Trump stated that on January 10, Iran reached out to the United States offering to start negotiations on the nuclear deal. Here's a quote from Trump. "The meeting is being prepared, but because of what's happening in that country, we may have to act before the negotiations." Trump said that he receives hourly reports on the situation in the Republic and is considering very tough options against the Ayatollah regime, which has started to cross red lines by killing protesters, as Trump put it. And here is the quote. "It seems that people who shouldn't have been killed were killed. These leaders, if you can call them that, rule through violence, and we take this very seriously. The military is studying the situation, and we are considering several very tough options." At the same time, political sources in the White House noted that the United States may carry out targeted strikes against Iran's armed forces in an effort to avoid actions that could lead to large-scale consequences for the civilian population. At the same time, Trump does not intend to send American troops to the Republic of Iran. Cable news network sources also said that Iranian security services are being considered as a target. In addition, the possibility of conducting cyber attacks on military, political, and government facilities is being studied, as well as delivering Starlink terminals to restore internet access for protesters. And now January 13 could become the X day. Because it is on this day that Trump will hold a National Security Council meeting to discuss options for supporting the protesters and weakening the Ayatollah regime in Iran. Tehran had earlier vowed to strike United States military bases and ships in the Middle East in response to United States actions. In response to this, Trump stated that Iran would then face unprecedented early strikes. Of a force they've never experienced before, they won't even believe it. I have very powerful options for action. In conclusion, Let me remind you that protests in Iran began on December 28, triggered by the rial's fall to a historic low and a sharp rise in prices. However, soon social discontent turned into political concerns, including the resignation of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He called the protesters terrorists and ordered the unrest to be suppressed. And now it seems that unless the United States and Israel intervene and strike the Ayatollah's regime, unfortunately, the protest may lose again in Iran. I'll leave it at that, friends. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like, friends. Let me remind you once again, if you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so by donating through the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.